Okay, hope everyone's having a good day so far. Nice to see all of you. It is Tuesday, and so we will do a Rashi from the third Aliyah today in our Parsha. Again, there's so many mitzvot in this Parsha of Mishpatim. When you get to the third Aliyah, so many different angles and aspects of life and interpersonal relationships are mentioned. We learn a little bit more about damages. We learn a little bit more about shomrim, what happens when you're watching someone else's item. We talked a little bit about lending and borrowing. We talked a little bit about, let's see, at the end here, the treatment of other people, etc. And in the end of the Aliyah, we talk a little bit about lending money and a very beautiful set of psukim, giving us some of the guidelines for how to treat another person who's in need and another person who's reaching out to you for help. So the passage begins, Im kesef talveh es ami, if you lend money to any of my people, my nation, es ha'ani imach, to the poor person who is amongst you, lo tielo kenoshe. You're not supposed to be like a creditor against them. You're supposed to be like a friend helping them rather than some kind of cruel creditor who's on their back. Lo tesimun alav neshech. And certainly you're not allowed to place interest upon them. One of the prohibitions of the Torah is to lend money with interest. And then, im chabol tachbol samas re'echad bo hashemesh teshivenu lo. If you have to take collateral, which sometimes you have to do for a loan, and you take the person's garment as collateral, you have to give it back to them before the end of the day. You can't allow them to be without their only garment. It's their only garment, what they cover their body with. What's he going to lie in? What's he going to go to sleep in? And if you treat him cruelly, that person's going to call out to me, and I'm going to be there to back him. I'm going to be there to listen to his cries because I am compassionate. ... You should be compassionate as well. Even when someone comes to you in a destitute situation, coming to you for help, coming to you for a loan, you're supposed to help them not just because you have a contractual obligation to do so or because you have the means to do so, but you're supposed to do so in the kindest way possible, listening to their plight, trying to help them out, not trying to be overly cruel in the process. Many interesting Rashis on this set of psukim. I'm going to focus on the first pasuk right now and a couple of important Rashis. The lead word of this pasuk is strange. It says, im kesef talve es ami. If you lend money to my nation, which makes it almost sound conditional, like if you were to do this, if you were to choose to do this, here's how you'd go about doing it, indicative of the fact that there's no actual obligation. So Rashi comments on that word im, and he quotes Rabbi Shmuel Omer, kol im ve'im shebatorah rishus chutz mishlosha v'ze echad mehem. Normally, when you have the word im, it's talking about rishus, a voluntary type of activity. If you would like to do it, great. If you don't want to do it, great. It's just giving you guidelines for what happens if you opt into the activity, except for 3 cases in the Torah where im is not an indication of a rishus, of a voluntary action, but an obligatory action. So over here is one of the exceptions. This is not an option, this is an obligation. If someone comes to you for money, they're poor, they're destitute, they need a loan, and you have the means to support them, you're obligated to support them in that way. Just a plug here for the Hebrew Free Loan Association, which we have in town here in the greater Washington area. Tremendous communal institution, which does just this. This enables every person to give to that communal fund, which enables them to give out interest-free loans to people who are in need, especially now during COVID, when people are in greater need. They've really stepped up to the plate to do so in incredible ways. So this is an obligation. Even though it says if, it means to tell us an obligation that we have to be able to lend money to people who are in need. But then, these words are also of interest to Rashi. If or when you lend money, es ami, to my nation. So why does it say to my nation? Why doesn't it say in kesef tave, if you lend out money? Why does it say es ami? Rashi tells us that this es ami and es ha'ani imach, the next couple of words over here, are all indicative of the hierarchy of giving, which is so important, not just in terms of lending, but in terms of priorities in helping those in need in tzedakah as well. It's a hierarchy which is paskin lahalacha. It's a hierarchy which we adhere to up until today, telling us if you only have a certain limited amount of resources, limited means, who are you supposed to help first, second, third? What are your priorities in terms of help and giving? So Rashi comments and says, es ami, my nation, ami vegoy, ami kodem. It doesn't mean that you can only lend to God's nation. You can only lend to the Jewish people. What it's saying is, if you have the means to lend, and you could lend to ami v'goy, to Jews and non-Jews, the reason it stresses es ami, my nation, says God, the Jewish people, is because ami kodem, because my nation is first. And then it says es ha'ani, the poor person, right? That is to tell us not just that you can only lend to poor people, you can lend to anybody you want. You have a rich friend who needs a loan for some reason, or they prefer to borrow money instead of using their own. You're also allowed to lend them money. Perhaps you're even obligated to lend them money. But the reason it stresses es ha'ani, the poor person, is again to tell us a hierarchy of priorities, a balance of priorities. Ani v'ashir, if you have the choice to give to a poor person or a rich person, ani kodem, the poor person comes first. So the poor of our nation come first, and in terms of poor and rich, the poor come first in general. Aniecha va'aniei ircha, aniecha kodmin. So from the word imach, amongst you, we learn that the closer ones to you get first priority, right? So if you have this hierarchy, starting with the whole world, you have the choice of Jews and non-Jews. So who gets first doesn't mean who gets only, but who gets first? The Jews. Amongst the Jews, you have rich and poor. Who gets first? The poor. Amongst the poor, who gets first? You have imach, those who are closest to you. What does that mean? It means if you have poor in your own circle, in your own family, in your own relatives, and poor in your city, aniyecha kodmin, the poor in your circle, in your family, come first. And so forth with other concentric circles. Aniye ircha, vaniye iracheres. You have poor people in your city and poor people in another city. Aniye ircha kodmin, the poor of your city come first. V'chein mashma'o, and that's how you'd read it into the whole pasuk. In kesef talveh, if you're going to lend money, es ami talveu v'l'goy. First priority is to ami and not to a goy. V'le'ezeh me'ami, and to which ones from amongst my nation? Es ha'ani. First you give to the poor, ule'ezeh ani, and to which poor? La'oto she'imach. That's darshaning each of these words. Ami, ani, and imach tell us all the funnels of that hierarchy. In the choice from the world, you choose Jews. In the choice from Jews, you choose poor. In the choice from poor, you choose those who are closest to you, imach. First, your immediate concentric circle, then aniyeh ircha, and then aniyeh acheres, and then the rest of the nation. That's the priorities in giving. In tzedakah, and as I said, that's what we follow until today. It's very hard sometimes. One wants to help everybody. One has good instincts to help everybody. That's our kind desire and kind side of our personality that comes out. And so we sometimes need the halacha to come and to govern what we do. Otherwise, we may not actually prioritize right, because our emotions sometimes tend to lead us rather than the logic of some kind of legal system. And that's what the halacha affords us here, a proper moral perspective on how to go about dispersing our limited resources. One more drasha on this pasuk before we end, which is just very, very beautiful. Davar acher. So that's all the halachic part of the pasuk. But al pidrush, in terms of the homiletic aspect of this pasuk, when it says in kesef talve esami, God says to us, when you lend out money to my nation, it's as if God is saying, lo tinhag bizayon bahava hu amin. Be very careful not to degrade anybody. Be very careful not to embarrass anybody. Just remember, when you lend to them, they are me. They're my nation. I have their back, says God. So be careful what you do to them. God standing up for the poor, standing up for the destitute. And es ha'ani imach, you should lend to the poor person imach with you, which is as if to say, homiletically, havamistako ba'atzmacha ki'ilu ata ani. In order to have the proper respect and the proper perspective, when you lend out, the way to get there, the way to treat the ani with the utmost respect is to imagine yourself in their position, to imagine yourself as the ani, imach, as if it's literally with you. And then you'll be able to have the right perspective and attitude and approach for giving in general and for helping those who are in need. So he tells us the hierarchy halachically, but also the attitude and perspective that we're supposed to take in the process, which ultimately feeds into the next psukim about how we take collateral and how we leave the person and how we make sure that their dignity is intact in the process. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be well.